And we're now live.
I think if you were to, during this present time, ask the average person, especially a person in leadership, what can I pray for you? And probably the answer would be pray for wisdom. So how does a person actually obtain wisdom? The answer to that question may surprise you a bit, but it's found in the book of James. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. It says there to consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. I think we would all agree we're in somewhat of a trial right now. It says, know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So what it's saying there is that there are times when trials enter our lives, like the present one, and there's nothing we can do to avoid them. Yet we understand they occur for a reason. And it's only when we have overcome those trials that we then understand why they have entered our lives. So to acquire knowledge, you have to study, but to acquire wisdom, many times you have to observe. And many times that wisdom includes the crucible of pain. You know, most people believe their way is right. Yet we're told in scripture, it's God who weighs or tests our innermost being. God judges motivations. In other words, not just what we do, but why we do it. God told Samuel, man looks at the outward appearance, but it's God who looks at the heart. God beholds the heart of those who may fool others and also those who deceive themselves. That's why it tells us in scripture, God prefers obedience to sacrifice, because we can't receive his favor through offerings. Certainly, worship ceremonies are legitimate, yet they're no substitute for the obedient heart that chooses to do righteousness and justice. You know, a person who's arrogant may justify their pride, asserting its necessity to be successful. The ends justifies the means, in other words. But according to God, haughty eyes and a proud heart, they're treacherous, because that kind of lifestyle is sin. And so throughout the book of Proverbs, wisdom almost always includes reverence for God. There's no wisdom without first submitting to God and recognizing that any attempts to live contrary to his word are futile. And so just acquiring knowledge without considering the will of God is foolish. Foolishness is also laboring against God, and it's foolish to labor without him. No human wisdom can thwart the purpose, the will, the wisdom of God. Not even practical skills guarantee victory without him. And you think about it, popularity doesn't make a good leader. One of the characteristics that distinguish good leaders from celebrities is that those motivated by popularity, they often believe what the press asserts. You know, celebrities tend to think of themselves more than they ought. But good leaders, however, know their limitations and understand that they are not all that others think they are, nor are they what they want them to be. So here's the idea. Wisdom is God-given, so be humble. A popularity is given by others, so be grateful. Pride is self-given, so be careful. It tells us the one who trusts in the Lord will never be defeated. In Psalm chapter 27, verse 3, says, though a host encamp against me, my heart will not fear. The war rise against me. In spite of this, I shall be confident. So that's the question I'll leave with you. Will you rely upon the same omnipotent Lord and the provision of his word in every time of apparently overwhelming trouble and trial? If you will, God will prove to you that victory belongs to the Lord. Let me close in a word of prayer. Lord God, I pray that our public service commissioners, in addition to all those who trust in you, will be filled with the knowledge of your will and all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that they're able to walk in a manner worthy of you, to please you in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of you. Strengthen your people with all power, according to your glorious might. Grant wisdom and discernment to those who seek you, I pray, in the blessed name, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Ron. I hope all's going well.
All is going well. Thank you very much for letting me share, and hope things are going well for you also.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and giving us the word.
My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Well, I guess we don't need to give any time for people to come into the hearing room, so we can go ahead and begin. Today is the Utilities the administrative session for the Georgia Public Service Commission. We have the utilities agenda. Commissioners, we'll start with the consent agenda. Does any commissioner have an item on the consent agenda they'd like to have held or moved to the regular agenda? Hearing no such request, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously. We'll now move to the regular agenda. Does any commissioner have an item on the regular agenda they'd like to have held? Hearing no such request, we will start with item R1.
Good morning, Commissioners. Item R1 is docket number 42310, Georgia Power Company's 2019 Integrated Resource Plan, and docket number 42311, Georgia Power Company's 2019 Demand Side Management Plan. This is the consideration of Georgia Power Company's income qualified tariff-based energy efficiency pilot filing. Staff recommends approval of the filing of the plan, the terms and conditions, and the IQTBE-1 tariff. There are 4 updates that staff recommends to make to these the filing plans. 3 are related to the current pandemic conditions, and 1 is a text update for the amount spent per home to change it from not exceed 7,500 to an average of 7,500 per premise. So, and staff recommends approval.
Any questions or comments on item R1? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Yeah, item R1 passes unanimously. Item R2.
Good morning, docket number 42509. On January 24th, 2020, the hearing officer rendered a decision stating that Walton EMC was not in violation of the Georgia Territorial Act. On February 21st, 2020, Georgia Power filed an application for a full commission review of the hearing officer's initial decision. On March 17, 2020, Walton EMC and Nestle Purina Pet Care Company filed a response in opposition to Georgia Power's application for a full review of the initial decision. And on April 26, 2020, Georgia Power Company filed a brief in support of its application for review of the initial decision. The decision as to whether to reverse the hearing officer decision as part of this review of the initial decision is at the commission's discretion. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
I have a question on this one. An affirmative vote on this is to have a hearing on this matter or not.
It's to approve the hearing officer's initial decision or whether or not to approve it.
Okay.
Wait a minute now, along with Commissioner Pridemore's question. So a yes vote is affirming the hearing officer's initial decision?
Yes, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on item R2? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay, you opposed?
Yes.
Commissioner Primor? Okay. Okay, so item R2 passes 4-1 with Eaton, McDonald, Eccles, Shaw voting yes, and Pridemore voting no. Along those lines, it's probably not a good opportunity in the next few weeks, but maybe in a month or so. I'd like to refocus again. I don't know whether it's an NOI or rulemaking. I'd like to see if there's some way we could make these territorial cases a little more objective. It's getting more and more difficult. They're very fact-based. Every side seems to have their cases that they cite. And just to let you know what I've been working on, like I said, I think we'll give a little bit more time with the corona. But after that, I'd like to see if we could take another shot at this and somehow make this a little bit more objective. Any other questions or comments? Any other that was the last item on the Utilities Division agenda. Anything else? Any commissioners have anything they'd like to say? Comments, questions? Okay, hearing none, we're adjourned. And we will move into the next docket. We'll give a few minutes for everybody to prep.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Prenovitz.
could I talk to Reese? Because Ben Stockton was trying to hook into this, and he did not get the letter that I got, and I sent him mine, and I don't know if that's working because he's not hooked in yet.
What is it you want to talk to him about?
With Reese?
Yeah.
He might need to send Mr. Stockton a specific invitation so he can hook into the
Oh.
hearing.
Okay. I don't even know. I don't think Reese is on, but I can
Yeah.
text him. Oh,
Or
Reese,
someone
Bart?
I'm here.
Or the IT people?
Ma-
Unless
Max
it would
is
work,
there.
because I sent him a copy of mine, and I don't know if that's working.
Max normally sends those out.
Yeah, what is the email address we need to send it to?
Yeah, hold on, let me get that for you.
I have it, Max.
Okay, good.
Reese, if
EN.
you could forward it to me, I'll send it immediately.
Yeah, I'll send you that list again. Hold on, I'll send it right now.
All right.
Okay, thanks, guys.
So Tom, did you take advantage of some cheap flights and head out to San Francisco? All right. Let's go ahead and begin. This is docket 29849. Second here. For some reason, give me 1 second. All right. This is docket number 29849, Georgia Power Company's 22nd semi-annual Vogel Construction Monitoring Report. We'll begin with the appearances. Georgia Public Service Commission. Preston, I think you're on mute. Georgia Public Service Commission.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Preston Thomas and Ade Adinye on behalf of Public Service, Public Interest Advocacy staff.
Okay. Georgia Power Company.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Steve Hewitson and Kevin Green on behalf of Georgia Power Company.
Concerned ratepayers of Georgia. Mr. Prenovitz. You got to unmute, Mr. Prenovitz.
Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay,
Unfortunately.
whatever. Steve Prenovitz and hopefully Ben Stockton, concerned ratepayers of Georgia.
Okay, Georgia Association of Manufacturers
Clay Jones on behalf of GAM.
and Georgia Industrial Group.
I'll be here for Mr. Quintrell as well.
All right, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Partnership for Southern Equity.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Kurt Ebersbach on behalf of Georgia Interfaith Power and Light and Partnership for Southern Equity.
Georgia Watch.
Good morning, Liz Coyle on behalf of Georgia Watch.
Resource Supply Management. Resource Supply Management.
Jim Clarkson, present.
Okay. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Brian Jacob for the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Hey, have I missed any interveners? All right. Well, any other housekeeping matters to take up before we move into the witnesses? All right, don't hear anything. So Georgia Power, I know you combined your panel, so you can bring them up and swear them in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Steve Hewitson again. I noticed that I am not on the video. That's not by choice. It's telling me the host has stopped my video, so I guess somebody decided they didn't want to see me anymore. But that's okay as long as you guys are willing to listen to me from a blank screen.
The host stopped your video?
Yeah, oh, no, and now it's telling me to start it again.
Okay.
Now you can do it. All right, thank you very much. Good morning. At this time, I'd like to call Georgia Power Company's witnesses on direct, Mr. McKinney, Mr. Haswell, Mr. Kaczynski, and Mr. Abramovitz. I note for the record that we have filed the notice of publication as required by the Commission's rules. Gentlemen, if you would all please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Thank you. Mr. McKinney, would you please start by stating your full name, your employer, and your responsibilities for the record?
David McKinney. I'm Senior Vice President of Nuclear Development for Georgia Power Company. And in that role, I have responsibility for the Georgia Power and other owners' oversight of the project.
Thank you. Mr. Haswell, would you do the same?
Chairman Cliff Haswell, Georgia Power Project Oversight Director, have responsibility for all regulatory filings with this commission, compliance with DOE loan guarantee, and lead interface with Construction Monitor and other co-owners.
Thank you. Mr. Kaczynski, would you please?
Yes, I'm Stephen Kaczynski, President, Chief Executive Officer of Southern Nuclear Operating Company, subsidiary of Southern Company responsible for construction operation of Vogtle 3-4 and the operating plant.
Thank you. And Mr. Abramovitz? Aaron Abramovitz, Southern Nuclear Operating Company, Vice President, Business Operations, responsible for cost controls, commercial analysis, and budgeting and reporting. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. McKinney, on April 1st of this year, did you pre-file or cause to be pre-filed 13 pages of direct testimony in question and answer format in this case?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski, on April 1st, did you pre-file or cause to be pre-filed 16 pages of direct testimony in question and answer format in this case?
Yes.
Gentlemen, are there any corrections you need to make to your pre-filed testimony?
No.
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same as are set forth in your pre-filed testimony?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the court reporter has been provided a copy of the pre-filed direct testimony, and I now ask that the direct testimonies of these panels be copied into the record as is given here today. Mr. McKinney, on February 19th, 2020, did you file or cause?
Sorry, I was on mute, but
that's all right. Mr. McKinney, on February 9th of 2020, February 19th of 2020, did you file or cause to be filed Georgia Power Company's 22nd semi-annual construction monitoring report for Vogtle Units 3 and 4?
I did.
Was the 22nd semi-annual report prepared under your supervision and direction?
It was.
Do you have any changes to make to the 22nd semi-annual report?
I do not.
Is it true and correct to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, I would like to identify the 22nd semi-annual report as hearing exhibit GPC-1.
will be identified as such.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like Mr. McKinney to summarize the pre-filed testimony for his panel, and then for Mr. Kaczynski to summarize the pre-filed testimony of his panel.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. McKinney and Mr. Kaczynski.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to report on the progress of the project. Mr. Haswell and I are appearing on behalf of Georgia Power Company, while Mr. Kaczynski and Mr. Abramovitz are appearing on behalf of Southern Nuclear. The purpose of our testimony is to support Georgia Power's 22nd semi-annual construction monitoring report and to request that the Commission verify and approve the actual expenditures of $674 million invested in the construction of Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4 for the reporting period of July 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. The company's investment during the reporting period was made pursuant to the Commission-approved Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. The company's cumulative construction capital cost of the facility through the reporting period now stands at approximately $5.9 billion after accounting for the proceeds of the Toshiba parent guarantee. Through March 31st of this year, approximately $206 million of Georgia Power's $366 million contingency budget has been allocated to cover forecasted costs in several budget areas. Although we continue to believe that the entire contingency budget will be allocated by the end of the project, both Georgia Power and Southern Nuclear continue to believe that the project has sufficient contingency remaining to complete the project. Before providing an update on project progress and schedule, I'd like to provide a brief update on the project team's efforts to address the COVID-19 pandemic on site. Some of this information was also provided in the update letter we filed last Thursday in this docket. Since the filing of our direct testimony, COVID-19 has continued to impact daily life around the globe, and the Vogtle 3 and 4 site is certainly no exception. The company and Southern Nuclear remain dedicated to protecting the safety and health of all workers on site, as well as the surrounding community. The project continues to take proactive measures to prepare for and respond to the pandemic. In responding to the pandemic, we continue to lean heavily on the guidance and advice of our dedicated medical advisors, public health officials, government, and regulatory agencies. Following confirmation of the first positive case on site, Southern Nuclear led a workforce reduction effort to improve productivity and to more easily implement social distancing guidance recommended by authorities. Mr. Kaczynski will discuss these measures more specifically in a moment. The fact remains that this pandemic is dynamic and evolving every day. While we know more today than we did several weeks ago, the project continues to be confronted with new and unpredictable challenges that must be addressed. With so many unknowns, we cannot yet forecast the ultimate impact to cost and schedule of COVID-19 at this time. As the pandemic continues, we will continue to keep the Commission up to date with current information and the status of actions being taken on site to protect the health and safety of our workers, while also continuing forward progress on Vogtle Units 3 and 4. During the reporting period, the project made significant progress on construction, testing, and startup, which carried into the first quarter of this year. Through the end of March 2020, total construction on the project was approximately 86% complete. In February, Southern Nuclear led a schedule refinement effort to update the site work plan in response to the negative trends that had developed in 2019 relative to the previous site work plan established by the rebaseline of April 2019. After analyzing the accumulated backlog of hours against that plan, the project team determined that it was time to reassess the plan, incorporate lessons learned, and produce a new aggressive site work plan that still provided margin to the regulatory approved in-service dates. The resulting plan includes a resequencing of multiple system turnovers to support interim milestone dates. The company continues to firmly support the project strategy to target an aggressive site work plan with completion dates ahead of the regulatory approved in-service dates of November 2021 and November 2022 for Units 3 and 4, respectively. Despite contrary arguments made by others in past VCM proceedings, we continue to believe that the pursuit of an aggressive site work plan is the right tool to meet the regulatory approved in-service dates. The aggressive site work plan allows the project team to identify and address risks sooner rather than later. In fact, the recent COVID-19 pandemic has served to demonstrate the wisdom of this strategy. The pandemic has presented an unforeseen risk to the project that could ultimately impact project cost or schedule. Had we elected to work to a less aggressive schedule as others have suggested, I have no doubt that we would be in a very different position today than we otherwise are. In conjunction with this schedule refinement effort, Southern Nuclear also developed a benchmark schedule to the November 2021 regulatory approved in-service date for Unit 3 to serve as an additional reference point when assessing project progress toward that completion. Since implementing the February 2020 schedule refinement, a time in which we have witnessed the onset of COVID-19, overall performance on Unit 3 is falling short of projected production goals, particularly in the electrical and mechanical disciplines, whereas performance on Unit 4 remains in line with the current plan. Despite current shortfalls in performance on Unit 3, there remains sufficient margin to the regulatory approved in-service date of November 2021, according to the benchmark schedule. The project's ability to continue reaching production targets relative to the site work plan ultimately will be a strong indicator of successful completion of the project by the regulatory in-service dates. To date, Georgia Power continues its active oversight of Southern Nuclear and the project contractors and has worked to address project issues and concerns as they occur. Together with Southern Nuclear and Bechtel, the company continues to focus on increasing productivity and maintaining project momentum without sacrificing the health and safety of the workforce at the site. In closing, Georgia Power requests that this commission verify and approve $674 million in actual expenditures invested in the construction of Plant Vogtle Units 3 and 4 for the reporting period of July 1, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. Thank you for your time and attention, Commissioners. Mr. Kaczynski will now report on behalf of Southern Nuclear.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Good morning, Commissioners. We appreciate this opportunity to update the Commission on the progress made in building Vogel's Units 3 and 4. As discussed in detail in the VCM report, the project made significant progress during the reporting period. Testimony is to support Georgia Power's 22nd semi-annual Vogel construction monitoring report and to update the Commission on efforts by Southern Nuclear regarding the construction and future operation of this long-term asset for Georgia customers. Our testimony, along with the testimony of Georgia Power's witnesses, Mr. McKinney and Mr. Haswell, provides justification for the verification and approval of Georgia Power's actual expenditures in the project during the reporting period of July 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. Although occurring outside the reporting period, we will also update the Commission on the schedule refinement effort completed February of this year and provide an update on the project's ongoing efforts to address and mitigate both current and potential impacts of the project related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me start with COVID-19. As we continue our work to complete this project, we recognize that we must learn to live and work with this virus for the long term. Over the past 2 months, placing the highest priority on the safety of the workforce and surrounding community, we have proactively implemented mitigation measures in response to the challenges presented by this unprecedented pandemic. Many of the proactive measures we implemented in March continue today, including providing additional protective equipment, enhanced deep cleaning and sanitation practices, as well as implementing social distancing strategies such as spreading out and increasing common areas, eliminating group transportation at the site, and mandating those who can telework to do so. Beyond these basics, early on, our protocol on site ensured that anyone tested and their close contacts were promptly self-isolated off-site. We acted quickly to build an on-site medical clinic designed to expedite test results, minimize turnaround time for close proximity screening, and improve facilitation of clearing personnel to return to work. As a part of our response to each confirmed positive case, we offer medical testing through our medical clinic to those who are identified as close contacts, regardless of the presence of any symptoms. We appreciate that our proactive testing of asymptomatic individuals is not standard practice, but this practice allows even asymptomatic confirmed positive individuals to get the medical attention they might need and further minimize the spread of the virus. Our testing data helps us identify the occurrence of COVID-19 within the workforce as quickly and as effectively as possible, so we can modify preventative measures accordingly to further prevent the spread of the virus. These findings would not have been possible without our proactive approach to testing. Since our first confirmed case in early April, we have had a total of 185 confirmed positives and 511 confirmed negative results. While the number of confirmed cases has steadily increased over the past few weeks, our 7-day rolling average suggests that we are starting to see a downward trend on new positive cases. One of the most encouraging signs that we're starting to see is the recovery and return of our team members back to the site. We're thankful that of those 185 positive cases, 119 of them have recovered and are cleared to return to work. As I mentioned earlier, our protocol requires that both the tested individuals and their close contacts be self-isolated for 14 days or until test results are known. At our peak, we had over 500 individuals self-isolating. Today, that number is 267. In mid-April, as positive cases, absenteeism, and self-isolation rates continued to grow, Project took action to reduce the workforce by approximately 20%. This reduction in workforce is intended to further mitigate the impacts of the pandemic to the site. As we transition to this smaller, more streamlined workforce, we expect to see a decrease in near-term construction production. The longer-term objective is to gain operational efficiencies and productivity by reducing workforce fatigue and absenteeism. On the assumption that we are able to stabilize and increase productivity to pre-pandemic levels, we are maintaining Unit 3's aggressive site work plan in-service date of May 2021, while Unit 4's target in-service date is expected to shift out 2 months back to May 2022. As we are prioritizing key work fronts on Unit 3, we expect some of our near-term milestones to push out slightly, with Unit 3 cold hydro testing expected in the June to July timeframe, and Unit 3 hot functional testing commencing in the August to September timeframe. The cost impact of our mitigation efforts to date, including the schedule implications of this recent workforce reduction, is estimated at approximately $20 million for Georgia Power. In the coming months, we expect the pandemic will continue to present challenges and risks to the project. Even with this realization, the fact remains, however, that circumstances outside of our direct control may arise that could affect project performance and cost. The overall long-term impact of the pandemic on cost and schedule remains difficult to estimate. And Southern Nuclear cannot presume any one outcome or predict the ultimate cost and schedule impacts based on the pandemic at this time. Project team continues to monitor the potential risks and impacts to the project and will continue assisting Georgia Power and keeping the Commission updated on information as it becomes available. Now I'd like to address our February 2020 schedule refinement. As discussed in both the VCM 22 report and our pre-filed testimony, the project completed a schedule refinement effort for the site work plan in February of this year. Recall that the April 2019 rebaseline adjusted the site work plan following a comprehensive effort that included a full accounting of commodity quantities to go and tied the construction and testing schedules together. By comparison, the February 2020 refinement utilized recent performance, lessons learned, and adjustments to the sequencing of construction and testing activities to more closely align and prioritize work necessary to meet project milestones from hot functional testing to commercial operation. Consistent with our past practices, the resulting site work plan represents an aggressive yet reasonable path towards completion of the project. In an effort to provide all of our stakeholders, including this Commission, the information needed to track progress towards the regulatory approved in-service dates, the project developed a November benchmark schedule that quantifies the margin between the aggressive site work plan and the regulatory approved in-service date of November 2021 for Unit 3. This benchmark clearly illustrates progress and status to our regulatory commitment and instills additional confidence in the project's progress towards commercial operation. The project team continues to have routine and productive discussions with the PSC staff. One topic that has had much discussion and debate in and out of these VCM proceedings is our practice of not updating the unit rates incorporated into each iteration of the project's baseline or refined schedule since 2018. Southern Nuclear strongly disagrees with the assertion that unit rates should be adjusted during the past schedule rebaseline and refinement efforts. Adjusting unit rates at this point in the project would alter the view that site leadership, co-owners, and external stakeholders have of past performance and would inhibit effective comparisons to current performance. While some unit rates have proven to be unachievable over time, the project accounts for unit rate performance in other ways, such as higher assumed cost performance indices or CPIs in our schedule and budgeting tools. In other words, adjusting unit rates is not the only way to manage performance challenges. While some would advocate that updated unit rates would assist the project in measuring or planning for work progress, we firmly believe that revising unit rates this close to completion does not make sense and would negatively affect our ability to effectively manage a project. Now turning to project costs, the estimated total capital cost is unchanged and remains at $8.4 billion. We continue to allocate portions of Georgia Power's $366 million contingency on a quarterly basis to fund forecasted cost increases and risks. Through March 31st, 2020, approximately $206 million of Georgia Power's share of the total project contingency estimate has been allocated to the base capital cost forecast. Included in our allocations to date such as the April 2020 workforce reduction, construction productivity, craft labor incentives, additional support resources across the project, subcontracts, and procurement, we expect to utilize the entirety of the contingency funds as we progress towards completion of the project. Today, the project is over 86% complete, with direct construction for both units over 80% complete. Bulk and system commodity installation continues on both units, as does system turnovers and support of system and component testing. As we progress through our major milestones, we continue to utilize partial release to test for systems and component testing. This practice provides continued flexibility in balancing construction system turnover efforts with the initial test program system testing requirements. While some would say that this practice is too aggressive and adds complexity, we believe that the PRT program has provided great benefits, as we have been able to pull risks forward and uncover component issues earlier than if the project had waited for a system to be 100% construction complete before testing. Getting our hands on equipment and systems sooner rather than later is a major benefit for us and allows our testing, maintenance, and operations teams to gain familiarity with the plant and equipment that they will operate for years to come. For the past 12 months, we have made substantial progress in testing. And as of April 30th, 2020, we are proud to announce that Unit 3 open vessel testing is complete. With open vessel testing complete, the reactor vessel will be assembled, and as we begin closed vessel testing and prepare for cold hydro and hot functional testing to be performed in the coming months. As construction continues on Unit 4, initial energization for that unit is also expected in the coming months. Even while managing through this unprecedented global pandemic, the progress has continued on site, with the project team showing exceptional adaptability and commitment. Through April, construction and testing activities have continued at a pace that gives us confidence in meeting the regulatory approved in-service dates of November 2021 for Unit 3 and November 2022 for Unit 4. Next few months will be pivotal as we adjust to a smaller, more streamlined workforce and seek to improve productivity. This pandemic will undoubtedly bring its share of challenges to the project. As we continue to evolve our daily work practices, the safety of our workforce and the surrounding community remains paramount, and will continue to guide our decision-making at the site as we work towards project completion. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chairman, the witnesses are now available for questions from the bench as well as cross-examination.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay, Georgia Public Service Commission.
Thank you. Good morning, panel.
Morning. Morning.
My questions today, I thank you for the COVID update. And just to be clear, as we go forward, my questions are going to focus on the review period and the schedule you were working under and spending money under through the end of February. So pre-COVID will be the focus of my questions today. Would I be correct in stating that SNC is the agent for the co-owners and is responsible for overseeing all aspects of the project, from design, construction, testing, and achieving commercial operation?
The agency agreement is such that Georgia Power is agent for all of the owners for the project, and in that role, Georgia Power has selected Southern Nuclear as our agent to administer project design and project management for the projects.
And am I correct that the construction contractor is responsible for almost all construction work up to handing over systems and eventually the entire plant to SNC operations?
So Southern Nuclear, Southern Nuclear has overall responsibility, and Bechtel, as the prime contractor, does manage the majority of on-site direct construction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The owners look to Southern Nuclear as the project manager with overall responsibility. They have selected Bechtel as the contractor that has the majority of the scope for construction and system turnover. But then Southern Nuclear also has their workforces that will do testing and eventual startup of the project as well.
Okay, well, given that, would it be fair to say that SNC's ITP organization has and will continue to have significant influence over Bechtel's ability to sequence work?
So the organization works as an integrated team to construct and test the facility and bring it into service.
So then, as they're working as an integrated team, SNC does have influence then over how that work is sequenced?
Yeah, we as SNC, we have influence really over all activities that occur at the site.
And is it correct that SNC's Unit 3 Senior Oversight Manager is the testing and turnover director?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. Is it correct that SNC's Unit 3 Senior Oversight Manager, I believe Scott Briggs, is the testing and turnover director?
Yeah, Scott Briggs oversees the ITP organization and has responsibility for Unit 3 and the integration of construction and ITP. Yeah, we made an adjustment and split out responsibilities between the two units a couple months ago.
Okay. And has he had any construction management experience in the past, or has his past experience been focused on testing?
Yeah, Scott Briggs has well over 30 years of experience in the nuclear industry. Early in his career is working on new plant construction. He's been an outage director. He's been plant manager at multiple sites. Extremely experienced and probably the best we could find for this role.
Yeah, definitely not questioning the number of years of experience. Some of those roles didn't sound like construction experience. So I was just asking if he had specific construction experience.
I would say construction experience in the similar role that he has today early in his career on plants that were built 30 years ago. Early in his career was involved in the testing, which by its nature was intimately involved with the construction. So not construction manager experience, but has been involved in this exact environment previously in his career. And then if you
Mr. Kaczynski.
Construction. Not as large as this project, and as you know, this type of project hasn't been done in 30 years.
Mr. Kaczynski, you're gonna
capital upgrades.
Mr. Kaczynski, you're gonna have to repeat yourself. I think your internet connection not working very well, and you're gonna have to repeat your
similar
response to Mr. Thomas. We can't hear you now.
Yeah, sorry, it just dropped off there.
Let me add to what we did hear Mr. Kaczynski say while we're waiting on him to pop back in. One of the beauties of the structure that Southern Nuclear has put in place there with their organization at the site is Scott Briggs. His heavy focus will be testing. That's his primary expertise. That's where Unit 3 project is headed. That's what we need. He reports to a heavily experienced construction gentleman, Glenn Chick, who is the Senior Vice President of Projects for Southern Nuclear. He's the lead site guy. Heavy in construction, that's who Scott reports to. In addition to that, as you previously asked, Bechtel, a leading world nuclear constructor, probably the leading constructor, has been chosen to manage the construction scope of the project. They set one of their most experienced gentlemen, Paul Tews, running Unit 3. So he's partnered up with Scott to make sure that Unit 3 is getting everything it needs finish construction and head into the testing phase. So it's really a combination of the right, at least from the owner's standpoint, we feel like they put together the combination of the right experience and resources to get this thing done.
All right, can I ask you to turn to page 5 of the VCM report? And it states that the project is continuing to meet its milestones, including the start of open testing. And am I correct that in stating that the scheduled date for the milestone start of OVT was November 30th, 2019?
That's correct.
And
That is correct.
okay, and the planned completion date for OVT was January 31st, 2020, correct?
The April 2019 baseline, that was the scheduled date that was subsequently adjusted in the February 2020 refinement.
Okay, and the actually completed date was around the week of April 15th, 2020, correct?
It was April 30th.
Okay. And would you agree that the start of OVT was not a meaningful milestone to demonstrate the true readiness of the project to begin and efficiently complete OVT?
I would disagree with that. It's very important when we establish the start of a milestone. It signals a change in phase at the project, and that has specific meaning to a portion of our work. The operations, testing, and the entire workforce needs to be fully aware that we've transitioned into that process. So never really was it communicated that meant OVT was going to start and run continuously. We always knew there would be some construction pauses during that process, but meaningful in fact for the people on site. But I do understand how that can be interpreted externally.
If I can direct you to page 6 of McKinney-Haswell pre-filed testimony, on line 6, talk about the turnover of the Unit 3 main control room to support initial testing. Was this a start milestone?
So that would be the first time that we were operating in the main control room. We were previously operating in a temporary control room not too far from there, but we swapped over controls and operations to that control room. And since then, we've been continuously operating that control room and operating testing from there. So it was a very big milestone for the project.
What exactly was turned over?
Partial systems and PLS and DDS, some of our data display and plant logic systems were turned over. And we were able to operate different pumps and different equipment from the control room. Since then, we've turned over more and more of that control room, and our operators have access to complete open vessel testing, some of our pre-op tests from there. It's managed 24/7 currently with a shift manager, shift supervisor, system operator, and reactor operator. Operating different parts of the plant and getting great hands-on experience running the plant from the control room currently.
Is the temporary control room still in operation?
I don't believe so.
And how many months was it from the milestone start?
I missed that.
Excuse me?
Question, can you repeat it again?
The previous question was, is the temporary control room still in operation?
I believe it is not. I can confirm that though, is need to have that. I do want to just reemphasize and not underrate the significance of the main control room being available for testing. Key to our project success is building an operational culture And establishment of that main control room signifies a significant change to where now we're operating components from the ultimate facility, and we started to gain actual operating hours towards eventual full licenses for our operators. So to be able to have that facility now open and operational to begin testing and do testing and staff and set up the protocols needed for, when we do start up the facility, was a massive milestone for this project to accomplish.
And staying on page 6, on line 10, you talk about the project completing its first pre-operational test. Can you tell what that test was?
I do not have that, by memory. We can get that for you.
Can I make that a hearing request, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Kaczynski said they can get it for you. It's a hearing.
Thank you. And then further down on the same page, line 19, you talk about continuing to work towards system turnovers with the turnovers of 5 systems in the month of March 2020. Could you list those 5 systems for us?
We can pull that data for you, Mr. Thomas.
Pull that.
Okay, you don't have what 5 systems you're referring to?
Just not a memory. I want to be perfectly accurate.
Referring to those 5 systems, were those total systems or partial systems?
Typically partial systems.
And then of those partials, were some of them even further split from the original system?
Those particular, I can't say exactly, but I will talk in more general terms. Part of the 2020 schedule refinement, we did adjust and refine the systems and broke them down into additional subsystems, and then have loaded them logically to the milestones.
Yeah, and I've got the list of systems. It's the CVS1, that's your chemical volume control system, BDS1, CAS1, which is your compressed air system, RCS1 alpha, and PLS4, which is one of your plant logic systems. And BDS is your steam generator blowdown system.
And just walking through a couple of these, these 5 turnovers were used to show good progress in your testimony. So I just wanted to go through the dates of some of these. So referring to RCS1A, the April 2019 baseline, it was 131 days late compared to that baseline. Does that sound correct?
Subject to check.
Yeah, subject to check.
All right. And CAS1 compared to the baseline was approximately
more generic.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kaczynski. You were breaking up there.
Yeah, maybe I can address this on a more generic kind of thinking. So the baseline was established in 2019.
My questions are specific. They're not general. I wanted to go through these dates. So CAS1 compared to the baseline was approximately 157 days late. Is that correct? Subject to check.
Subject to check.
Okay, and CVS1 compared to the baseline was 147 days late. Subject to check. Would you agree with that?
Subject to check. It's just
BDS1 compared to the baseline was approximately 70 days late. Would you agree with that? Subject to check.
Mr. Thomas, I think you're trying to make the point that our system turnovers as a whole, as a data point, have lagged our April 2019 baseline. I think the concept we all want to understand and make sure we all understand this concept is you don't have to have a system turned over by construction to testing to test it. You can be 70% complete, 80% complete. You can still test that partial system and still advance the project's goal of getting hands-on systems and components to achieve the ultimate outcome of getting this plant in service. And so system turnover is a great data point. It's a good metric to track, but 100% system turnover from construction to testing is not always necessary to start the testing process for a system.
Thank you. So looking at PLS 4 compared to the baseline was approximately 152 days late. Would you agree, subject to check?
Subject to check.
So all of these points were all partial systems, not complete systems, and they were all significantly late compared to the baseline, correct?
And that is, I don't think we're late at all at this point in time.
Compared to the baseline.
We've done our schedule rebaseline, have retied these systems. We have now dealt with the backlog. We're maintaining our milestones. And as you can see from the November benchmark schedule, we have significant margin to the November. So, you know, we can talk about the tool we use aggressively on site, but essentially we have achieved OVT. We're on track for cold hydro testing, and we're still maintaining our May commercial operation date that I think we established a couple of years ago. And so, you know, all the discussion about the April baseline really doesn't apply to us going forward. But if you want to keep going through that, we'll be happy to.
Yeah, I would say, I would just add to that. I mean, the point you're making is the reason that we did a rebaseline earlier this year. Is these references you're making are to the aggressive April 2019 baseline that these several milestones and several systems had gotten off of that track. And to Mr. Abramovich's point, there's a lot of flexibility in how you do that. And at some point, when you're driving to an aggressive schedule, that's why we've said on several occasions, you're going to have to rebaseline more often than maybe a project that's not working to such an aggressive schedule, because just due to the nature of an aggressive schedule, you're going to run behind on some of the systems, and you're going to be chasing some of the systems. And when you get to a point where you need to reset the work plan, which is where we were earlier this year, that's what you do.
And I understand the need for rebaselining. I'm focusing on the idea that on page 9, for instance, of McKinney Haswell testimony, line 22, you talk about how the project has achieved its highest number of turnovers with 5 turnovers in March 2020, and you a positive trend for the area. And I'm just curious if completing 5 only partial turnovers is a positive trend for the project.
I think we would all agree that yes, it is.
Okay. And am I correct to say that Bechtel Construction generally cannot complete construction to meet the turnover dates?
I think a challenge that we have had in establishing these turnover dates is maintaining our electrical construction productivity to do that. So what's most important is what's the impact of that? And if that impact challenges our overall schedule and cost, then certainly that would be a problem. But that is not what we're seeing today. We do continue to manage these systems. They are supporting the milestones. As we said in our testimony, we're seeing some near-term adjustment based on kind of the COVID-19, which exacerbated the difficulties we have in electrical. But at the end of the day, there's a significant amount of testing on these systems. Many of them are very near completion. And as long as they support the milestones, because they have to be done for the milestones, the project remains on track. And currently, we remain on track with a bit more risk with the COVID pandemic.
And I understand that COVID might change things going forward, but all of the schedules and costs that I'm asking questions about today are what were filed in February and pre-COVID. I'm going to ask you to turn to page 7 of McKinney Haswell testimony. And on line 1 of testimony, you state that it's continued its negative trend relative to the April 2019 site work plan. Am I correct when I interpret this to mean that they'll continued to miss scheduled completion dates and accumulate a deficit in earned hours?
Yes, you can see from the graphic down at the bottom where we started to trend off of that April 2019 baseline. And as Mr. McKinney and Mr. Kaczynski said previously, it's one of the reasons we re-baselined and recast that look going forward to make sure that the site aggressive plan had an achievable ramp in front of it. And you saw in February and March, we were hitting that ramp prior to COVID-19 impacting the project. And I want to remind everybody that is well ahead of the November benchmark plan that we set and the regulatory dates that we have agreed to with this commission.
And talking about that aggressive schedule, staying on page 7 of your testimony, line that begins on 11 and ends on 13, you state that this strategy continued to be valuable as issues were identified early in the process and allowed the project team to adjust as needed to mitigate those long-term impacts. And the strategy you're referring to here is that aggressive, but what the company calls achievable IPS. Is it a reasonable strategy if it continues to produce late construction and partial turnovers?
I would say the ownership group definitely agrees with this strategy by Southern Nuclear. We do think it's a reasonable strategy, and it has got equipment into the testing and turnover team's hands earlier than if we were to just have a schedule that was purely based on November. To schedule it earlier, to get construction done earlier, gives us time to mitigate if we find any issues.
Well, couldn't you say that the schedule shouldn't be based on any particular month date, but the schedule should be based on what's achievable?
And we believe it is.
Schedule?
Yeah, I think the schedule we have established, out of the February 2020 SNAP, and as we said, it was really informed by the previous 9 or 10 months of really seeing what our capability was at the site. And so that was loaded into our 2020 SNAP, and we do believe it's achievable. In fact, we were achieving that in the first couple of months after the rebaseline.
And would you agree that construction risk has been a main driver for increased cost and delays in schedule really ever since the laying of the base mat for Unit 3 in 2013?
Given that the vast majority of all activities at the site are construction, it would logically make sense that that would be the driver.
And Bechtel's the construction contractor, and I assume the reason for that is because Bechtel's specialty is mega projects, correct?
Yeah, Bechtel's a very diversified construction company in all different sizes and industries. So their experience is broad.
And Bechtel, as you've said before, is allowing you to influence the construction sequence. Would you agree that it's possible that Bechtel is indifferent to what strategy SNC uses since they're on a cost plus contract?
No, I would not agree with that. As part of Bechtel's construction completion agreement, they are incented to bring this facility online within certain schedule and cost So we are, I'd say, aligned as a one integrated organization in order to make the best decisions we can regarding cost and schedule. And if I could follow up back on something I said I would get to you. That first pre-operational test involved the spent fuel system. And essentially it was moving water and demonstrating we could pump water through the spray headers into the spent fuel system. So does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. On page 10, line 10 of McKinney Haswell pre-filed testimony, looking at line 10, I take that sentence to say that SNC and Bechtel will manage the work and mitigate any negative trends. Would that be a correct interpretation?
Yeah, so it basically means what we did in the February 2020 refinement plan is where Southern Nuclear and Bechtel worked together to sequence work scopes that advance the schedule as much as possible and as quickly as possible so that we could stay on track to our November benchmark and our November regulatory dates.
And if SNC and Bechtel are unable to meet the performance requirements and not mitigate the project risks, will GPC, are they going to accept the monetization of those risks and in turn expect ratepayers to pay the failure for SNC and Bechtel to perform and mitigate?
What is your question there exactly? We expect SNC and Bechtel to continue to meet our November benchmark dates as they have been.
Right, and if they don't, are ratepayers going to be expected to pay for that failure to perform and mitigate?
I think if they did not, and there were to be a cost or schedule extension, we would have to come back to the commission and let them make that decision of what we would do moving forward.
From our earlier conversation, it's clear that the company is still using an aggressive schedule. So I'd like to ask a few schedule-specific questions. If I could ask you to turn to page 9 of Kaczynski Abramovitz at line 12, you talk about the project team still believes that an aggressive site work plan is the right tool to meet the regulatory approved in-service dates. Can you tell us what specific metrics you're looking at that show this strategy is working?
So the perfect example of that is the November benchmark schedule that we established off of our refined February 2020 schedule. The two are linked up in our tools. So as production is achieved or not achieved to our aggressive schedule, we can see the margin very clearly of how that aligns to those November dates that we've committed to. That's a perfect metric. We can see construction production, how it impacts. We can see turnovers. We can see procurement. Everything is integrated together, just like it is in our aggressive schedule to the November benchmark schedule.
Isn't it true then in order to meet that, some of the subcontractors' production must dramatically increase in order to get to the point to perform the hot functional test?
Yeah, for the aggressive schedule and even the November benchmark schedule, we anticipate that subcontract performance needs to improve, right? And so it's not just about getting hours up as it's easy to track. It's opening up those work fronts, it's staffing up for subcontracts. And I think we've been very clear with the staff that it's not just about getting more production, it's about how you get that production. And it is opening up work fronts and hiring more people as those work fronts become available.
And so it sounds like you may be clear about communicating that to subcontractors, but isn't it true that so far craft earned hours, there's been shortfalls?
Through February, March, our subcontracts plan was actually meeting our aggressive site plan and even to the November benchmark. Just recently, with the advent of the COVID pandemic, we have seen some shortfalls to both those schedules.
Yeah, I'd like to give some perspective on that too, on the subcontract. So typically, this subcontract work follows the completion of the mechanical work then the electrical work, and then the subcontractors come in and finish insulation and HVAC. So it is expected and normal for the project now to open up more work fronts and have more work available for the subcontractors. So, you know, our challenge going forward is now to increase the staff of the subcontractors and execute that work. And we have it completely lined out what needs to be done to support the cold hydro milestone and hot functional milestone. And it is achievable, but certainly challenging for us.
Achievable but challenging for the November dates?
No, for our, I'm speaking to our internal May dates. Do not see it a challenge at all for the November dates.
No challenge for November dates. Isn't it true that the April 19 baseline was also identified by staff during the 2021 VCM as being too aggressive?
You have to ask them. I think in our review remarks, we mentioned that there was a lot of opinions about how aggressive that schedule was, and I think they admitted it was aggressive.
But it is true, isn't it, that the April 29 baseline, which was fully complete only in June of 2019, proved to be obsolete only a few months later around October?
I would disagree with the premise.
Perspective what I would give to that, if you look back over the last couple of years, when we took over back in 18, I think Unit 3 direct construction was under 50%. Unit 4 was obviously before that. We took it at the end of 18 up to 62. And then through the following year, we took it by using this tool, and we've categorized it as a tool. It's taken Unit 3's construction then up into the almost mid 80s at the end of last year. And currently we're north of 90%. So yeah, I was a lot of dialogue about what tool can you use and is it most effective? But if you look at just the results, the plan is now greater than 90% constructed. And follow on kind of Aaron's point when we were talking about Scott Briggs, now is the time, the right skill set is those that are most experienced in testing, given there's less than 10% of construction left to go. And really only 5% of that is system related, tying to the milestones. The rest is you know, emergency lighting and outlets and things of that sort that really are not pivotal to completion of the project.
You don't believe the fact that these schedules are constantly requiring to be re-baselined and refined only months after being developed might suggest that they're aggressive?
It's just a baseline. I think there's a misconception of what the real reason of these tools are. It's a baseline schedule that you set one day in time. And then we utilize an active daily and weekly, monthly schedule to actually manage performance. And then you just compare yourself against the baseline. So I think there's this fallacy that if you're not directly on a baseline that you're not going to be successful. And I think we've proven that to be incorrect.
Well, how does having a schedule that craft and managers continue to not be able to meet affect morale?
I think the morale is terrific. I mean, we, at the end of 20, we challenged the organization to achieve things that they never achieved before. If they did, we heard some time off, relief at the end of 2018, and that organization produced more than this project ever had, and morale was incredibly high, and we rewarded that workforce. So, you know,
so you're not experiencing.
The workforce doesn't look at the April 2018 baseline on a day-to-day basis. That's really a management tool that we use and help communicate to you all. But on a day-to-day basis, they have a schedule, they have a objective, they know what commodities they want to install. We focus them towards the milestones, and you know, that's what drives morale, not particularly where you are against a baseline that is a static document. The workforce manages itself off of what's in front of them, not necessarily what's behind.
On page 8 of McKinney Haswell's pre-filed testimony, you discussed that February 2020 refinement. When did this refinement process begin? Was it late November or early December?
Late November.
And the refinement was completely rolled out to all the project reporting tools in late April, is that correct?
Yeah, so all the tools were loaded by late April. We were able to start working towards this refined plan starting in really late January, early February.
And in terms of months, this 2020 refinement took about the same number to complete as the April 2019 rebaseline, correct?
I would disagree with that. With the commodity accounting for all the commodities that they left to go back when we started in 2018, went all the way into the spring of 2019. That was almost a 4-month process. We started at the end of November, and we published a schedule and filed in direct testimony and in the VCM report in February. To my count, that's roughly 2 or 3 months versus 5 to 6 months.
Okay, but similar time frame to the rebaseline. But let me ask you this: am I correct in stating that in the refinement they didn't verify quantities to go?
That's correct. There was really no need to do that.
Okay.
Right. There was no need to do that. That was done a year prior.
And it's correct that the refinement didn't put resources down to level 3. Is that
Can you
correct?
restate the question?
Sure. It's correct that in that refinement, you didn't look at things down to level 3.
No, we went all the way down to level 3. That's not correct.
Okay. So the refinement for 2020 did look at level 3.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
And the live schedule is a level 3 resource loaded schedule that does have resources built into it. I think where you're trying to go is the new plan moving forward is loaded on a level 2 basis across the units in the buildings, but the live schedule is fully resource loaded at that level 3.
Okay. And let's see. At page 7 of Kaczynski Abramovich's testimony, it looks like the February 2020 refinement, there isn't any anticipation of spending beyond the 7.3 billion forecast. However, it does look like there's anticipated for using the contingency. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, Preston, did you say you're on page 7?
I thought I was on page, looking at page 7 at line 15, going into page 8 through line 13. Does that help?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Looking at page 7 and 8 of your testimony, it looks like the refinement doesn't anticipate spending above the 7.3 billion. However, it does look like it anticipates using further contingency. Am I correct in my assessment of that?
Yeah, our cost and schedule systems are tied together, and we've always said that we're going to fully allocate the contingency that exists throughout the end of the project. And as we said in the past, we've allocated contingencies for items like construction performance, assuming a higher CPI on unit 3, unit 4 to go. And that was all included in this refinement effort and even our latest quarterly disclosures from a corporation perspective.
And how much contingency remains for Georgia Power Company's share?
$150 million. Or actually 160, sorry.
And do you know?
And I think one point that's important just to.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Allocate. So
You're going to have to completely repeat your response. We can't hear any of it.
I think we've lost George.
Mr. Hewitson, you have any?
If you could repeat the question, one of us can answer that.
Yeah, Mr. Thomas, if you don't mind repeating the question, I think the other witnesses might know the direction.
Okay, so we just said that 160 million is what remained of the contingency, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And that there's no anticipated spending beyond the 7.3 billion, correct?
The 8.4.
Yeah,
total cost.
8.4 total cost.
Total cost. And do you know when the February 2020 refinement was expected to draw down on that contingency balance?
No, I think we've talked about it in the proceedings before. We don't project or predict when a risk is going to occur or when we're going to allocate contingencies. We do have a general indication of when we think we may allocate contingency, like with construction being at its peak at this point and being probably the most expensive part of this project is building it. We'll probably allocate more contingency in the near term than we would towards the end of the project and the testing phase.
So general answer is the near term, I guess.
I would tell you, as construction completes on Unit 3 and it reaches its peak in Unit 4, I would expect higher levels of contingency allocation than towards the end of the testing phase.
Do you know is anticipated to be drawn down in the near term?
I do not. What I would tell you is in our last week in our quarterly disclosures, we allocated an additional contingency amount, which is in that 206 million we've already allocated. That was to ensure that Unit 3's CPI left to go for every additional hour was budgeted at a 1.5 CPI, and Unit 4's CPI for every hour left to go was budgeted at a 1.35 CPI. And if those trends don't hold in the coming months, we'll adjust our estimate further.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thomas? Turn right there to Georgia.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good to see everyone. I'm Steve Prenovitz, Concerned Ratepayers of Georgia. Mr. Stockton apparently isn't going to make it, so I'll try to do his piece too. Hope everyone's well. Dr. Bagali, it's been a long time. How have you been? Good to see you. Basically, I have focused on the focusing my cross-examination on the McKinney panel, and Mr. Stockton was going to do the Kaczynski panel, but since he's not here, I'll do both. First question is, passed out some handouts yesterday, and I'd like to see if you got them. There were 4 handouts. There was a copy of CRG's testimony in the 2021 VCM. There was a statistical chart of Georgia Power's data. There is a 1-page summary of the Jacobs Grace testimony from VCM 2021. And there was a chart that I prepared of the COVID-19 stats comparing the Vogel cases to the state of Georgia. Do you people have those handouts?
Yes, we do.
We do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Let me, again, I'm focusing primarily on Mr. McKinney and then certainly Mr. Kaczynski and Mr. Abramovitz, who might be a distant cousin of mine, can certainly jump in. Summarizing the purpose of the testimony as outlined by Mr. McKinney. Number 1 was to justify the $674 million expenditures for VCM period 22. Also referenced that Georgia Power's investment in the project has been prudently incurred, and the project team continues to implement the strategy using an aggressive site plan. Is that correct?
All those things are correct.
I'm sorry? Okay, also, a consistent theme of every VCM that Georgia Power has ever submitted was that basically all costs have been prudently incurred. Is that correct?
We believe it has been, yes.
Fine, thank you. Okay. The second point you made was you're going to update and explain the schedule refinement of February 2020. And you talked a little bit about that, and I'll get into that, why it's necessary. What you didn't mention, though, and I'll get into that later, is what is the impact on the schedule and the budget. But one point I want to be very clear on is that these changes were not driven by the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that correct? Everything that's in your testimony does not take into consideration the cost and schedule impact or potential impact of COVID-19. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Certainly the filed VCM report was filed in February, but we did provide a letter to the commissioners with an update on COVID-19 and steps we're taking at the site and some potential cost impacts of that.
And in our opening remarks, I think both McKinney and Jasinski both mentioned that the approximate cost currently estimated for COVID implications is about $20 million for Georgia Power.
Yeah, I'll have some questions on that. Referencing that letter, which you did have, that was on April 30th. It was signed by a Kelly, is it pronounced the name correctly? Balcom?
Balcom.
Director of Regulatory Affairs. Is that a man or a woman? Kelly could be either.
It's a woman, Mr. President.
Okay. Why did she submit the letter as opposed to, one of your senior staff or even Mr. Bowers himself? Since this is such a critical aspect that one needs to consider.
I'm going to object to the question. I don't know how it has anything to do with the issues that are at issue in the VCM 22 proceeding.
Who's objecting? I can't say.
Mr. Hewitson is
Mr.
objecting.
Hewitson, okay. Well, basically what you're saying is this has a very severe impact on the company. And I would think that would be a senior management position.
Objection sustained. Move on, Mr.
Okay. Number 3, you did reference the response to the COVID-19 testimony. In your testimony, what you said was you cannot determine the cost and schedule impact. So hence it's not been addressed. We just confirmed that one. The second, as you just made reference to, is the April 30th letter, which is really an addendum trying to adjust or at least discuss some possible impacts of the project in a very general sense, I think you would agree. And the options range from maintaining the status quo to suspending on all site construction. Is that correct?
What was the question then?
Based on the April 30th letter, the addendum addressing the impact of COVID-19, the options in that letter stated the option would be from maintaining the status quo, which is basically doing nothing different, to suspending on all site construction. Is that correct?
Yes, in that letter, we laid out all the steps the company is taking to keep the workforce safe at the site, and the recent reduction in force to help further that social distancing of the workforce. But then we also went to say that the options are all the way to suspension of construction, which the company does not believe we will be doing at this time. But we don't know where the pandemic will go.
I understand. But that was an option that was stated in the letter. That's all I'm trying to establish, correct?
Yeah, the company was considering all options and how to keep the work going at the site and keep the workforce safe.
And one of them is possibly suspending the project, as stated in this. Also, in addition to this letter, there was a filing with the SEC on April 15th, which went into a little bit more detail on that. Is that correct?
Are you asking the witnesses if there was an SEC filing that referenced the project?
Yes.
Mr. Prentice?
Yep.
There was.
Okay. We'll talk about that too. All right, what I'd like to do is on the cross is I want to start on item 3, the COVID impact, and then get back to the other stuff. Okay, and what you've said, both McKinney and I think Mr. Kaczynski confirmed it too. It's not yet known what the impact will ultimately have on the project as it relates to cost and schedule. Therefore, you're not projecting the ultimate cost and schedule impacts based on this pandemic. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, this thing is still affecting, still changing, situations evolving, and it's just too early to understand and know the full effect of cost and schedule impacts, if there are any.
Yeah, I think the key word is full effects of in totality. As we filed in the letter and we said in our opening remarks, and even in the SEC filing, we had a range, and we got more specific with that range based on what we know today. As Mr. McKinney said, it's in totality is where the question is, because this is unprecedented, and today it's too hard to know and project what the totality of the impacts are going to be to the project.
I understand. But every company, really every family, including all of us who are isolated, have to deal with this uncertainty, correct? And would that not be particularly true in a multi-billion-dollar construction project?
I think we've been very clear with that, yes.
Okay, that's a yes. That's all.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
What does this line of questioning have to do with the business at hand on the VCM that was filed earlier this year? What does this line of questioning have to do with the subject at hand?
It has everything to do with it, Commissioner McDonald.
I didn't ask you, Mr. Prenovich, I asked the chairman.
Well, Ms. Prenovich, a question was asked. This hearing is based on costs that took place previous quarter.
From July to December.
Wrong. Well, why did they include this into their testimony if this was not part of the hearing, which it is? I mean, basically they said, this is a national emergency. It is going to impact the project. We need to do everything we can to try to understand it. And the question
I actually think it was included. I think it's fair to ask around it, but it doesn't need to be the focus of your cross, because there's a lot of unknowns, and I'm sure that the company is unprepared to speak in a level of detail that you probably want to be asking about it.
Well, that's fine, but let me ask, and if they, I'll accept their answers, whatever those answers are, but I think the questions are valid, and I appreciate just letting me do it.
Well, we'll see if they're valid or not.
Okay, I'm sure you guys will let me know. Okay. The other point is, do you agree that this virus could have a major, perhaps a devastating impact on Vogel's cost and schedule? Could have.
I think here's how, we'll summarize again, and it's been listed in our testimony, but essentially.
Sorry, I can barely hear you.
Yeah, we have met the challenge. We have taken, aggressive action to manage through that challenge. We do see a near-term impact on our productivity, yet to be determined the length of that. I anticipate we will work through and get to a level of productivity that, supports our continued internal plan. But we are just raising the issue that there is uncertainty, as you all know, as we watch this play out, and we'll keep everybody informed as it plays out over the next weeks and months.
Okay, and would it not be prudent?
And real quick, I think we've all been saying it very clearly, and Mr. Kaczynski said it too. We'll know what the impact is when we get there, when it's all fully developed. And you, Mr. Prenovich, you hit it. You're like, we're all dealing with this uncertainty, right? So it's uncertain for us too, and we're working through it, and we'll know the farther we get along what the true implications are to this project. We'll know when we know.
And by the next VCM period, by the next VCM report, we'll be in a much better position to have a view of that.
I'm sure you are, but still, we're spending over $100 million a month, and we need to do the best analysis we can, given the limited information we have. based on what we have. And I think I
Mr.
have some
Prenovitz,
input to-
I don't want to have to put you on a clock like we've done in the past. I don't want to hear any of your commentary. These are questions. And as I said earlier, if you're planning on making the majority of your questions about COVID, then we're gonna cut
I
those.
have a lot of questions, sir, and I wish you'd let me answer.
Then you might as well take those questions and throw them in the garbage, because if the majority of them are going to be about COVID, it's going to be a waste of time.
All right, let me put it.
Mr. Prenovitz.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm going to guess that 6 months from now, you're going to want to ask about it again when they have. So let's just try to keep things relevant and keep it on point.
Okay, let me try to do that. In your letter, you mentioned there was a 20% staff reduction. What was the staff before the COVID violence, and what is it now?
So in round numbers, on site, we use about 9,000 and we drop that down to about 7,000. That's a good number to use.
Okay, so currently we're at 7,000 now?
On site, yes. But you know, there's people remotely that support the project, so we'll just keep it to the on site individuals.
Okay. Then also in the letter, it said that the company expects the reduction to provide operational efficiencies by increasing productivity with the remaining workforce and reducing workforce fatigue and absenteeism. Wouldn't a 20% reduction in staff decrease productivity?
There's two concepts you need to think about. One is actual production and the other is productivity. Productivity is a unit of measurement per hours worked. We do believe we will see improved productivity with this reduction. And one of the reasons is we will have dropped absenteeism. And as you can see in our opening summary, we now have less people that are self-isolating off-site. So we believe a smaller, more streamlined workforce will be more productive. May not reach that level of overall production, like hours earned per week, but you know, from a productivity standpoint, which is a different measure, we anticipate seeing improvement. Yes.
Do you foresee additional staff reduction? Like, how did you come up with 20%? Why not 30, 40, or 50% reduction?
So we evaluated all that we saw on site and took all the factors in play. As you may have read, we made a round of reductions by asking volunteers. There's just different risk tolerances that individuals have as this pandemic kind of emerged. So we had a target that we went after. We asked those to volunteer. It took us a fair distance in that process. And this is what we believe is the right workforce that we can distribute between nights and days in Unit 3 and Unit 4 to be consistent with our goal of you know, keeping safety and the health of our workforce, but also moving the project.
Okay, and these are really the questions that Mr. Stockton would have been asking. And keep in mind that he has worked on, I think, like 15 different nuclear construction sites. So he certainly knows this much better than I do. But basically what he told me was, that may not be enough because of the close quarters that people have to work, you know, on the site like this. Is he correct? I mean, are you maintaining the proper social distancing guidelines by the CDC that you talk about, you know, in contact with? Can you do that on a site like this?
He's on mute. He's not. He's on mute.
Did you hear me okay?
Mr. Kaczynski, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I didn't touch anything.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Can you hear me?
We are following the CDC guidance, as you know.
No, can you hear me okay?
You can't social distance.
Mr. Prenovitz, you're the one on mute. Mr. Kaczynski was.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Mr. Kaczynski.
Okay.
Could you start the answer again, please?
Okay,
Sure,
go ahead.
I'll try to address that. We are following the CDC guidance as well as we can in this situation. So social distancing is a key part of our strategy. And in those areas where you may not be able to, just due to the type of work, in order to do it safely, you provide other mitigating factors such as masks and additional cleaning. But the most important thing that we do is if any of our workforce does not feel well, that they go to our medical facility and we send them home, and that's the best practice we have.
So am I clear then? I mean, are you comfortable now with the social distancing with the 7,000 workers, or is it possible that you would need further reductions to maintain that social distancing that the CDC,
Yeah, I think we're in a good place right now. I don't anticipate any further reductions.
So you're maintaining the social distance with the 7,000, is that correct?
As I just said.
Okay, just making sure, okay. Could you please take a look at CRG Exhibit 4? What that does is it's a chart that has the plant Vogel cases compared to the state of Georgia.
Question?
Okay, you got it?
Yeah, is there a question?
Yeah, there is. I just wanted to get the chart though first.
They have it, Mr. Prentice. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, cool. All right, you'll notice the data like of April 30th, there was 171 positive cases, and I think you just updated it today to 185. Is that correct? And that was through what date was the 185 cases?
Yesterday.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. So if you compare, I'll use the, that would change the percent a little bit. But for on April 3rd, 28% of, there were 171 positive cases, of which 610 were tested with results. Now, there were 48 other tests outstanding that they didn't have the data in there. So we'll just use this. So 28% positive rate for the workforce at Vogel at that time. And we compare that to the total state of Georgia, which was 16.4%. So my question is, why is the Vogel positive rate considerably higher than the state average?
Yeah, the straight answer is because the testing percentages are different. We're testing significantly higher percentages. So that's the answer. So until there's equivalent percentage of tests done, you really can't make a comparison.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. The state of Georgia is the state of Georgia. We're managing the project, and we're doing what we feel is the right moves and the right decisions on the project. So we're going to focus on the project, and the state of Georgia has its own practices.
But still, I mean, a positive test is a positive test. So just, I don't understand your answer, to be honest, because that is a significant gap. I mean, is that concern to you that is that difference? I mean, wouldn't it be better to be like around the state average?
Their answer was very clear. The company is more hyper-focused on testing than the rest of the state. As we've seen, there are people that have now been revealed that have had it that had no idea they even had it because of lack of testing. It's because there's a hyper-focus on COVID and the testing on their site that they have much, much higher testing than they would for the rest of the state. So the two aren't comparable. It made It made a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Would this be a representative, a 28% positive sample of, I think you tested like, of the 9,000 workers you had, and at the time we tested 610 with results, total results, that came to about a 6 or 7% total of the workforce. Would that 28% infection rate, a positive, be reflective of the entire workforce? If you tested all 9,000 workers, you think it would come in around 28% positive?
It's just clearly hypothetical. I would just say
I disagree.
We have some medical experts on our team. We use that expertise to guide our strategic decisions, and we believe we're taking all appropriate and prudent action to deal with this at the site.
I understand, but that's a statistical question.
They're not going to test people that don't have symptoms anyway. So just to apply a blanket percentage across the population is completely incongruent with the way that any epidemiologist is studying this. So no, they would have to have symptoms. If there are people that are well, then they're not going to get.
Well, with all due respect, what came out from the CDC is a lot of people can be positive that show no symptoms. That's one of the great problems of this disease. You look, physically great, have no temperature, everything like that, and still, carry the disease and infect others. So the question is, I mean, ideally, you'd want to test all 9,000 people there. If you did, which do you think the positive result would be? That's the question.
Mr. Chairman, I think the witnesses have answered that question.
Mr. Prenovitz, no one has any way of knowing that. That's a guess. I just, look, I think sometimes you forget that your questioning on these cases is there to try to find something or influence commissioners. Well, you're losing us, man. I mean, come up with something that just kind of makes some general sense.
Here's the data, okay.
If you were up to date, there are not 9,000 personnel there anyway.
No, there are 7,000. But when
You
they
said 9.
I'm sorry?
You said 9.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Good.
Okay. Originally, there were 9,000, and of those 9,000 tested, basically, that was the result. Not 9,000 tested. Of the sample of those tested, it came out at 28. So the question was, is that, if you kept
Are you
testing,
talking to yourself, Mr. Prenovitch?
What's that?
Are you talking to yourself?
No, I'm trying to communicate, ask questions. I'm dealing
Ask
with
the question
I'm
then.
dealing with an unknown that everybody says is very, challenging, and I'm trying to think it through.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the witnesses have answered that question to the best of their ability. If we could move on.
Okay.
Mr. Prenovitz, I mean, seriously, are you talking on the phone right now?
No, man, no, sir, it's off. Anyway.
Let's move on. I warned you before. I mean, I think it's fair to ask a few COVID questions. It's on everybody's radar. A letter was filed, but we've gone off the rails now.
Okay, one other final question on this. Given if there are significant cost impacts of the COVID virus, who pays for that, the customer or the company?
The witnesses have already answered a similar question, Mr. Chairman, but I doubt if they want to add to their answer that they've given previously, they can. Can you restate the question?
Yeah, since we don't know what the cost of the impact of the COVID virus is going to be, but we know there is going to be a cost. Who would pay for that? Would that be will the company absorb that, or will they try to pass those costs on to their customers?
Well, as we stated several times here this morning, we have given an indication of the cost that we can see now, which are not that substantial, but this thing is still evolving, and so we're still, waiting to see what the final cost of scheduling cost could be. As you can ask this, you've asked this question plenty of times about any other kind of risk, and as the answer is to all of this, is this commission has set forth a process for us. We've got a budget, and we've got contingency of that budget. Today, we don't see anything that is threatening the extent of that contingency. In the event that we do, we will come back to this commission as we've been ordered to.
Does that mean, though, that you would pass on the cost? Is that a yes? And then let this commission decide? What is Georgia Power's position? Not what the commission's going to do. The costs that are impacted with this.
Georgia Power's position is we're going to spend costs prudently on this project, which we have up to this point. We will continue to do so. And at the end of the project, as the commission has laid out in their procedures, at the end of the project, we'll come forth and we'll present all of those costs. And then this commission will determine which of those are to be passed on to customers.
Okay, so that's a yes. And then let the commission decide. Okay, moving on to objective one.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to the commentary of him trying to recharacterize the answer. The answer will be as the record shows.
And that the record showed was that they'll, do the analysis, pass that on to the commission, and the commission will decide. That's what I understand the record shows. Okay, moving on. Objective one, all costs have been prudently incurred, and that's a $674 million. Okay. Then you mentioned that. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, if that was the question, that question has already been answered.
Okay, then
in response to one of your questions.
We'll be very, okay. Okay. And again, it's the position that if it's prudent, the commission should approve it. Is that correct?
That's a legal conclusion, and it's already been answered in the factual sense, Mr. Chairman.
Please, to, this would be exhibit number 1 from CRG. This was page 11 of the testimony, because this issue came up with the courts in 1990. And basically, this was with the Vogel 1 and 2 hearings, which many of you know I was involved in. And basically, the commission ruled that all prudent costs were not recoverable. Georgia Power appealed that case twice to the courts, lost. Here's what the ruling said, and then I'd like you to comment on that. Regarding 1 and 2.
Wait a minute, Mr. President, if you're going to ask them to comment on a legal ruling, that is going to be, I'm sure, objected to, and that
Let object, but let me read it, and then
the
object.
goal is to waste our time.
What, sir? It's just basically the key point they're saying is if it's prudent, you have to pass the cost on to the customer. With this ruling challenges that, and that's a precedent of how Vogel 1 and 2 was operated in dealing with some of these costs. Let me just read it and let them respond any way they want to. I'm not going to tell them how to respond, but this is what it said. And this is in the record because we put this in our testimony in VCM 2021, of which Georgia Power had no objections to. So it's in the record. So please just let me read it. It's not that long. What it says.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, he has proffered what his question will be, and I would object to that question as calling for a legal conclusion and also being irrelevant to the proceeding at hand.
It is not my conclusion. It is the court's decision, and
that's what makes it a legal conclusion, Mr. President.
Relevant or not. Let me read it. Please, may I? Thank you.
Go ahead and please read it.
Thank you. Excessive or unreasonable cost could result from a decision that was prudent when made, but the determining issue is not whether the decision to incur the cost was prudent, but who should bear the cost. Such expenditures represent an additional expense to the project, which is certainly more in the control of utility management than the ratepayer. Therefore, it is only appropriate that such excessive or unreasonable costs become the responsibility of the utility, not the ratepayer. Get a comment on that?
Mr. Chairman, while there are a number of reasons why the premise of the question is incorrect, I will object that it calls for a legal conclusion and is irrelevant to the VCM 22 proceeding.
It is, and plus, Mr. Hewitson, obviously in the future, every side has their ability to cite court cases. There's no reason to be reading this, Mr. Prenovitz. There's no reason to be asking for commentary. If we don't get on target pretty soon, we're going to have to put you on the clock.
Okay, budgets. Mr. McKinney, who's responsible for preparing the budget? Would it be Mr. Perrott, who's the chief financial officer, or you, or who's responsible for preparing the budgets?
Did you say preparing the budget?
Utilizing them, or or basically, who can defend them? Explain.
I think that'd be me. Since project control falls and budget reporting falls under my jurisdiction in Southern Nuclear.
Okay, cool. Just okay. How reliable would you say is Vogel's current budget?
Quite reliable.
I'm sorry?
Based on what we know today and the risk we see in front of us.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the whole thing. Based on what you know today and what?
Based on what we know today and the risk we see in front of us. Each time we present to this commission, whether it's on file or in person in proceedings, we present the best information we know today. That includes both schedule and cost and budget.
How do you explain then the continual budget escalations going from the original budget of somewhere, what was it? $6.4 billion to around, currently, I think you've got it now at about 10.5. So if the budget was reliable, why has it kept escalating?
Is there a question for the past 6 months reporting period in that?
Well, it's basically the trend of the budget. But yeah, I got specific questions coming on this one too, yeah.
Since VCM, I believe 17 and 18, 19 on previous VCMs, there has not been cost increase. So July 2018, August 2018, we set our cost estimate.
Sorry,
and
it's
the
audible.
estimate-
I'm having trouble hearing. Could you please say it again?
So what I'll say is, since July 2018, August 2018, the estimate for the project has not increased. It has held stable. We have allocated contingency as we said we would, but in the past almost 2 years, there has not been a change in the project's estimate.
Yeah, I believe, Mr. In your testimony, you said on, basically you made reference that the budget for Vogel 20, well, for VCM 22 is the same as it was from VCM 19. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I know you were off a little bit between 19 and 22, by the way. I think
Is that a question, Mr. Chairman?
Just an observation. Okay.
Mr. Krenovitz, you're not here for observations.
Okay, sorry.
No,
got it.
listen, if you
Yes,
keep
sir.
making observations, I'm going to put you on a timer, okay?
Okay.
This is your last warning, all right?
Yep. What would you say the okay, going to your budget, you have your budget in front of you, VCM 22?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, could you please refer to your current budget in VCM 22?
Are you, Mr. Krenovitz, are you talking about a specific page in the VCM 22
No, here,
report?
budget. Table 1.1.
Thank you. Thank you. We're there, Mr. Krenovitz. Go ahead.
Got you. Okay. Current budget that you have is, this is the bottom, 10.4 billion, right? Actual spent to date, according to your numbers, is 8.1 billion, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So that gives you a cost to complete of 10.4, 2.3 billion. Is that correct?
Capital plus financing.
That's
All right.
correct. And I'll echo what Mr. Haswell just said. That is capital dollars plus financing cost, capitalized financing cost.
That's correct. It is. Okay. What probability would you rate that you're going to hit that target? How reliable are you that basically you can finish this project?
I believe that is the exact same question that he asked about 10 minutes ago, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, what's the answer?
Yeah,
Well,
our
the
answer
record
is
will
in our,
reflect what the answer was.
yeah, our answer is in our testimony. And
Is that a yes or a no?
we've mentioned it many times.
No, answer it again. Is that a yes? We can make
Today,
it.
this is the estimate based on the information we have at hand. It is our best estimate that is presented to this commission each time we get in front of this commission.
Okay, then will you commit that if you do not hit this target, you'll put a cap on the cost and anything over this particular cost will become the responsibility of the company and not the ratepayer?
No, commissioners, we wouldn't agree to that. I mean, that's just goes against the premise and the whole structure of this agreement that we've been working under since we started this project.
Really? Well, how do you explain that your sister company, I think when CEO Anthony Wilson with Plan Kemper did agree to put a cap on that cost, and when Kemper's cost exceeded their budget, basically the company ate it. So why was it okay for your sister company, but not okay for Georgia Power to do this?
Mr. Chairman, that question is well outside the VCM 22 testimony, and actually he's asked it in previous VCMs, and he has been denied the opportunity to ask it as being irrelevant then as well.
It is most relevant. Why don't you just answer it? Will you put a cap on the costs? Simple. And you said
Objection, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Krenovitz, they said
Yes,
no.
they said no. Okay.
Mr. Krenovitz, listen
Yes,
to me. You got 30 minutes.
Fine.
That's it. 30 minutes.
Got it. Under the Vogel expenditures, basically it's been the company's position that the productivity has greatly increased under the management of Southern Nuclears and Bechtel compared to Westinghouse. Is that correct?
Yes, that is the company's position.
Okay, I understand. Now, if you would please turn to page 7 of which would be Exhibit 1. And there is the Table 1 chart that shows what the expenditures were from VCM 2012 to 2021. And we could add 22, which would be 674 million. So my question is this: before the bankruptcy, the highest expenditure was 222 million. After the bankruptcy, the highest expenditure was basically today, it's 674. So if you're doing so much better than Westinghouse, why is the cost almost 3 times as much in the same period of time?
Well, if you recall, I think I testified in all of these proceedings. If you recall, during those VCM periods that were prior to the Westinghouse bankruptcy, the project was working under a fixed price EPC contract. And that EPC contract was driven by milestone payments. And so if the contractor, which was Westinghouse and several different construction contractors during that period, but if they didn't meet those milestones, they didn't get paid. So the lack of payment during those VCM periods would be an indication of they weren't meeting milestones. They were not accomplishing the work that they had intended to accomplish during those periods. But in addition to that, if you look at the cash flow of a project, the higher expenditures are going to be near the end for construction as you finish up the units. But as you can see on this table that you've referenced, you've drawn a line where you delineate where the project came out from under an EPC agreement with a fixed price and milestone payments, and now is paying. You're seeing the reflection of productive hours that are being worked at the site. Of course, one thing that shows is the protection that the EPC agreement had, and the Toshiba parent guarantee helped to offset the difference between working under one versus the other.
And can one conclude that the budget that Georgia Power used, that Westinghouse provided prior to the bankruptcy, was grossly understated as to the true cost of the project?
Could you repeat that question, Mr. President? I'm not sure I heard it all.
Certainly. Based on what you said, right, could one conclude that the budget used by Georgia Power that was provided by Westinghouse grossly understated the true cost of the construction for those periods of time?
So what I would say to that is the budgets that were presented and the forecast that were presented by the company during those VCM periods was the reflection of what we believed we would pay to the contractor to finish the project. It is a well-known fact that Westinghouse and its parent company, Toshiba, ate a lot of cost and therefore was a large factor in their bankruptcy.
I understand.
But the forecast that the company has always put forward have been those accurate forecasts of what we thought that we would spend and present to this commission for the cost of this project.
Were you aware then that Westinghouse was eating a lot of the costs in this period of basically, when I go back to VCM 12, which would be February 2015, then the bankruptcy. So are you,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry, Mr. President, were you done with your question?
Yes, Mr. Prenovich, you've got.
Well, no, because the point I'm trying to make is they had once the bankruptcy, they had to come up with good, forecasts as best they could what the cost was going to be. And what they're saying is that the data that they had prior to this was unreliable because Westinghouse didn't, for whatever reason, not blaming anyone, but for whatever reason, these costs grossly understated what the actual expenditures were for those periods of time. That's my question. How did were you aware of that? And how did that translate into your forecast going forward? When there was a cost plus basis and you couldn't pass on the cost over the cost of Bechtel?
Mr. Chairman, this line of questioning and this subject was thoroughly vetted in the VCM 17 proceeding. I don't understand why we're going through it again in VCM 22.
And answer the question and see enough.
No,
I-
he did an objection, Mr. Prenovitz. You have an
Okay.
opportunity to respond to his objection.
It's very relevant. I'm saying basically it calls into question how accurate they say, based on the best information we have, we're doing these forecasts. What I'm saying is the information that they had prior to the bankruptcy, by their own admission, was not complete.
You know,
My question was, did that come in when you did the forecast? Were you aware of that? And has that been projected into your forecast going forward?
I'm going to sustain Mr. Hewittson's objection. This
Okay.
really dug into during 17.
Okay, fine. Okay. You. On the schedule, very quickly, I'm not going to go through it with Mr. Thompson did, but basically on the schedule changes, did that impact your new budget? Or actually it didn't, but why didn't it? Or is it going to impact the budget coming in for VCM 23?
Could you clarify your question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yeah, dealing with the schedule, right? You said you made several schedule changes in February of 2020, correct? My question is, when you make a schedule change, usually it impacts the budgets, you know, what your cost estimates are going to be, okay? We've established that those cost impacts of schedule changes is not in this budget. Will it be in the next one, and how much do you anticipate it to be?
So I think let's clear up some confusion. Our budget that we established in July 2018 had contingency associated with it. It also included dollars in between the regulatory approved dates and our aggressive schedule dates. And so as we refine or rebaseline our schedules, if needed, we adjust our cost estimates. To date, any of these schedule adjustments that we've made, these baselines or refinements, have not impacted our overall cost and schedule. We've allocated schedule dollars, we've allocated contingency dollars, but it hasn't impacted the overall cost and schedule of the project.
Am I clear in saying that the next budget is going to be very similar to this one, even though you made these schedule changes? Did I understand this correctly?
I would object to the question as being a forward-looking question. That was not the answer that was given. The answer was given was very clear that the contingency was included in this budget has not changed due to the schedule refinement from February of 2020.
I sustain the
Translating what he said, I want to make sure. So there is an increase, but you're using the contingency to apply towards that increase, which doesn't change the final budget. I understand that correctly, Mr. Hewis.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. All right. Please turn to the Jacobs summary, the one-page summary of the Jacobs Grace testimony. Got it?
We got it. Mr. President, the witnesses are there on Exhibit 3.
Okay, give me a minute. I gotta find the thing. Okay. Give me a second.
Your time, not mine.
I understand. I misplaced the page, so I got it on the computer. Got it. Okay. I'd like you to respond to, the points that Jacobs and Grace made in VCM 2021, which impacts this schedule here. And what he said was, staff has consistently stated since the 6th VCM and affirmed, by the principles of excellence in nuclear construction, schedules must be realistic and understood. Okay, then he goes on and says, without a realistic schedule, project management is in a poor position to support all the disciplines needed for the project. By the end of 2018, it was clear the project schedule was not realistic or achievable, and thus not a viable management tool. How would you respond to Mr. Jacobs' critique?
I think our response is we routinely interact with Dr. Jacobs and the staff, and we exchange views and opinions and factor that in our strategic decision making. So it's an
Okay.
opinion
Is he
by
right?
Dr. Jacobs.
Is Dr. Jacobs right? That basically he's saying the schedule was not realistic and therefore it was not achievable and not a viable management tool. Is Jacobs right?
Yeah, I can't speak for Dr. Jacobs. I would just say the tool that we use has, over the past 2.5 years, brought this plant to greater than 90% completion. We maintain our May internal schedule tool to maintain margin. So in our view, we have a schedule that is integrated and is meeting the needs of the project.
Okay.
And I'll add to that. You know, we've had a lot of discussions with Dr. Jacobs, and he understands where we are. We believe that this schedule is realistic and it's achievable. And we believe that it's an aggressive schedule. We talked about that a lot this morning, but it is an aggressive schedule that's understood, and it lays out a work plan that is understood. And when we get, you know, as we get further into utilizing that work plan, when it gets to a point where the aggressiveness has put us in a position where we need to rebaseline or restructure that schedule, or refine it, we'll do that. And that's not a bad thing. It's something to be expected when you're working on an aggressive schedule.
Let me push a little harder on this point too, just to provide some color. So out of the 2020 schedule rebaseline, we essentially drew a line about we needed to complete about 2% of construction on Unit 3 kind of going forward. And essentially we were able to produce that on average all of 2019. So to say it's aggressive, yes, it might be some aggressiveness in it, but it was something we clearly had achieved many times. And in fact, first few months of this year, we essentially achieved that. And if you reference that against the November benchmark, which back in February, we said we'd have to achieve 1.3% a month. So we were producing 2. We evaluated the November benchmark and believe we needed to do 1.3. Okay, so we exceeded the 1.3 because we produced 2 for the first few months, 3 months of the year. Now, our analysis shows we need to produce about 1% a month to meet the November schedule. So in our view, that is clearly achievable based on our history shows that we have done that consistently.
Given your history, as you just mentioned, isn't this the same argument you've made every time there was a budget quote change increase and a schedule change? I mean, you kind
as Mr. Abramovitz said, we have not made a budgetary change for quite some time. And if you look at even our schedule, we really affirmed May 2021 for Unit 3, and we actually pulled back Unit 4 a couple of months. We have let that go here recently as one way to mitigate the impacts of the COVID. But you know, essentially, the endpoint of our schedule has not changed. So the cash flows and some of the milestones in between and how we establish the work plan, yes, that has changed, but the ultimate date hasn't changed for us.
Okay, let me continue on some of Jacob's points and respond. He continues. Schedule assumptions, including unit rates from the onset, were unrealistic and unachievable. Then he goes on. This is what you said. The project, if I understand correctly, the construction was, I think you said 80% complete now. Is that correct?
On Unit 3, we're north of 90%.
Well, total. That's the number that you
Yeah,
had.
in the 80s, right? Unit 3 is close to 70.
Yeah, Unit 3, Unit 4 together, direct construction, and subcontract construction is over 80% complete.
Okay, and then I see you went to 80. Okay, and then the prior to that, it was 73%, correct?
Prior to what?
VCM 2021. VCM 22, you got it at 77% for construction. Excuse me, 79.6. VCM 21, you've got it at 73. Is that correct?
We just need to be careful there. There's many different discussions, and
I
I'm
understand.
just not sure of
Just
the
the chart, I
context
mean,
of this one. It could be,
This is from
you know,
your,
one unit's construction, combined construction,
I understand.
also additional subcontract. So we can check the numbers for you.
Oh, here it is. You can see it. This comes out of your testimony, the page 7, and this was your this is your current one. And let me read, okay, what Jacob said on the last time. He said, as of September 19th, September 2019, Southern Nuclear Estates construction was 73% complete, and that's right here on VCM 21. And he said, without a realistic schedule, we cannot confirm percent complete. Then he goes on, without an IPS based on realistic and achievable unit rates, an estimate of project completion is simply an educated guess.
Mr. Chairman, the witnesses have answered now at least 3 times that they believe the schedule is realistic and achievable. I don't know why Mr. Prentice is asking yet another question using quotations from testimony filed in VCM 20 and 21.
Let me answer Mr. Ewison why I'm doing this. It's because Georgia Power has for the past several years declined to enter into phase 3 of the VCM hearings, where witnesses or basically interveners and others would be able to ask these questions to Georgia Power to respond to the testimony presented by Jacobs, Grace, and others. You weren't there then, so the only time to do it is now. Now, my question isn't what Georgia Power's position is. I said, here's what Mr. Jacobs said. Do you agree? And if he's wrong, why is he wrong? That is my question.
His objection
with this because
they've answered numerous times they feel the schedule is achievable.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman. What they didn't answer was how they addressed the concerns of Jacobs and Grace, who said it's not achievable.
And Mr. Chairman, they have Mr. Kaczynski answered. Mr. Kaczynski answered at length the work that the project does, and working with Dr. Jacobs and the other construction monitors organizations. Mr. Prentice may have missed that answer, but it's reflected in the record.
I'm sorry, the what is in the record?
Mr. Kaczynski's answer to that question is in the record from this proceeding.
Maybe I missed it. What's the answer? He agrees or disagrees?
I think the record will show what his answer was.
Does he agree or disagree?
Implicit in their response that they think it's achievable, implicit in that is that there's a disagreement. I don't.
That's all I want. Say we disagree with your construction monitor. Thank you.
Implicit in it.
That's all I need. Next question. Going back to Mr. Grace, he's even more direct. Target dates of 2021 and 22 cannot be achieved.
Mr. Chairman, that's been answered.
Okay, so you're saying it can be achieved. Again, you disagree with Grace, your construction monitors. That's all I need. You disagree.
Seriously, I gave you 30 minutes. I'm starting to regret that now.
No, that's okay. I'll stay with it.
If you keep asking the same exact.
Yes, I do, because they're not answering it fully, sir. I mean, what I'm saying is you've got your construction monitor who has spent 10 years on this site. He's saying they have all kinds of problems on that. I say, okay, what is your response to what he's saying? And they say, we can do it. We think our stuff is right. That's it, so let them go on, elaborate, but they don't want to, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Prentice, in response to the questions that they disagreed with the statement in the 20 and 21 VCM testimony of Dr. Jacobs and Mr. Grace, had said, thank you, that's all I needed. I would ask that he move on to something relevant to the VCM 22 proceeding.
It's all relevant. But basically, okay, let me address Mr. Houston. If they're saying that the 73% construction rate was totally wrong, what do you think they're going to say about the 80% when they get their turn next month? They're going to say, oh, you got everything fixed, now it's 80%.
This isn't a debate. This is you asking questions. And
okay, I understand.
Evidence in the record.
He made a response. I'm responding to the attorney. Okay. Okay, so basically he says you can't achieve it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, over the years, Mr. McKinney and others have consistently maintained that completing the Vogel project is in the best interest of the customer. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Had and so on like that. It was in the best interest of the customer. Is that correct?
It still is in the best interest of the customer.
Continuing construction of the project of Vogel, regardless of how much it's costing currently, is still in the best interest of the customer.
Asked and answered for the third time.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, he said yes.
Yeah, just let him just answer.
Well, no, if he already answered,
For the record,
answer, because you're wasting all of our time.
Mr. Chairman.
What you need to do is listen.
Millions of dollars.
Mr. Predovich, you're so eager to talk and get your questions out, you don't listen to the responses. That's why you're on a time limit.
I hear the responses. They're saying, yes, it's in the best interest of the customer.
Thank you.
The next question is, given all the evidence that every other utility in the United States of America dealing with problems similar to or even less severe than Georgia Power's concluded it wasn't in the best interest of the customer. How do you reconcile your position with the prevailing thinking of the utility industry regarding nuclear construction projects?
I'd say if you look at table 4.1, our current estimate of completing this project has overwhelming positive benefits to our customers of $2.9 billion.
What's the break even for this project? What cost would it have to reach? Would it be no longer feasible? Because you say that every time it's $2 billion plus benefit. At what point would it become unfeasible?
I'm not aware of that calculation.
I'm sorry?
I'm not aware of that calculation, but based on our current cost and schedule, this project, which will have 60-year life of carbon-free generation, is overwhelmingly positive for our customers.
Overwhelmingly positive. 60 years. You know, there's no historical record of a 60-year benefit for that. Also,
Had a question?
Okay, so you haven't done a break-even analysis, but basically you said, you know, it's part. So every time that question came up, you said, hey, it's still a benefit to continue the project year after year after year, regardless of how much it costs. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to the question. It has nothing to do with the verification and approval of $674 million requested in VCM 22.
Objection sustained.
He has 3 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me, almost done actually. Okay, is Georgia Power willing, given that you're addressing the COVID issues now when it's in the formative stage, is Georgia Power willing to come back to the third round of hearings and present their findings and their analysis of what the impact is of COVID on this project, and have senior management testify to do that?
Well, I would submit to you that as a normal course of our VCM proceedings, you will see any indication, any impact from the COVID effect. And as a senior manager, I'll be glad to present it to you at the next VCM.
But are you willing to do it in this VCM, round 3, the rebuttal testimony? Because if let me put this, if Jacobs and Grace come in with several critical areas like they have previously, will you come back in phase 3 to, number 1, rebut them and answer questions such as I asked today in this VCM regarding what Jacobs and Grace will say, and then number 2, to expand on the information that you provided dealing with COVID-19, because you'll have an additional month or 2 months kind of, really further assess the impact. Are you guys willing to come back to round 3 to do this in VCM? This VCM, yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, before I let Mr. McKinney answer that, let me just remind Mr. Prenovic, if I can, that the COVID impacts fall outside the VCM 22 reporting period. We were providing an update to the Commission on the federal refinement in February 2020 and the COVID impact as a courtesy to provide as much up-to-date information as we can, as we always do, to be as transparent as possible with the commission and construction monitors and every stakeholder that's involved in the case. But to ask us to project whether COVID impacts will be fully known by the time our rebuttal testimony is due in the end of June, I think, or early July of this year is an answer, or is a question that I don't think our witnesses can answer. And besides, I would object to it being as irrelevant to the VCM 22 proceeding.
Okay, let me respond to this. Number one is that Georgia Power did provide COVID input into this, and they said it was very preliminary. So what I said, I didn't say come back with a final analysis. I said come back with as best a complete analysis of the additional information and knowledge that you will gain in the period of time between now and when you would present testimony for the round 3 of the VCM. And number two, which is especially relevant to this VCM, is will Georgia Power commit to coming back to round 3, the rebuttal phase, to respond to any questions, material issues of disagreement that Jacobs and Grace will most definitely raise in their testimony next month.
Mr. Hughes, the objection is sustained.
Yes or no?
Mr. Predovich.
Will they do that?
And
Mr. Chairman, it's a simple, will they have them come back so we can answer questions based on what Jacobs and Grace says in the next round?
we're going to go to lunch until 1 o'clock. And next up will be Georgia Association of Manufacturers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.